معالي حسين موجود؟
بدأنا الآن.
إيمان معالي حسين موجود؟
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام والرحمة معاليك.
السلام عليكم.
السلام ورحمة الله. مرحبا عليك، كيف حالك؟ مساك خير.
الله يحييك.
الله يحييك إن شاء الله، عليكم إن شاء الله. مشكورين على هذا المشروع المشترك.
لا بالعكس، احنا سعداء والله بالتعاون مع الإخوان والمكتب والمركز، شركاء في هذا المشروع وفي غيره من كل النشاطات والفعاليات، ونسعد والله بذلك. يعني
الله يحفظك.
الحقيقة نتكامل في يعني إيصال رسالة التعليم
ونحن نشكركم على هذه التكامليه الايجابيه اللي بيننا وبينكم. الله يحفظكم ان شاء الله، بيكون اثرها كبير ان شاء الله. والمواضيع اللي تختارونها مشتركه، هذه مواضيع وايد مميزه ومهمه،
كل ما يتعلق بخدمه
التعليميه. مهرة جاهزين؟
جاهزين معاليك.
شوف اذا اكتمل الحضور بعد اذنك تقدر
الحين الحضور بعدين يدخلون معاليك، فبنبتدي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين محمد بن عبد الله وآله وبيته وصحبه أجمعين. معالي حسين الحمادي وزير التربية والتعليم بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، رئيس مجلس إدارة المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي. معالي عبد الرحمن العاصمي مدير مكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج. السادة المحاضرين والخبراء المشاركين لدينا في هذه الندوة. السادة الحضور المشاركين في الندوة الإقليمية حول استثمار الذكاء الاصطناعي في تحسين أنظمة التعليم. نرحب بكم في هذه الندوة الإقليمية التي تنظم من خلال الشراكة الاستراتيجية بين المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي ومكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج، والتي نسعى من خلالها لتقديم الدعم والمساندة للأنظمة التعليمية والعاملين فيها في وطننا العربي، من خلال تبادل الخبرات والاطلاع على أفضل الممارسات وتبني السياسات التعليمية الداعمة لتطوير التعليم في أوطاننا. السادة الحضور والمشاركين، يعد الذكاء الاصطناعي واحداً من أكثر التحولات التكنولوجية الملحوظة التي تؤثر بشكل كبير على الحياة البشرية في عصرنا الحالي، ويتم العمل بشكل متسارع على تطوير تطبيقات الذكاء الاصطناعي، ويزداد تواجدها في حياتنا أكثر فأكثر كل يوم، ولا يعد مجال التعليم استثناءً من هذه القاعدة. فعلى الرغم من أن تقنيات الذكاء الاصطناعي في هذا المجال ما زالت في مراحلها الأولى نسبياً، إلا أنها بدأت بالفعل في القيام بدور أساسي في الطريقة التي يشارك بها المعلمون والطلاب في التعليم والتعلم. كما يعد الذكاء الاصطناعي أحد أهم الأدوات التي يمكن استثمارها في تسريع وتستيرة التقدم نحو تحقيق الهدف الرابع من أهداف التنمية المستدامة التعليم 2030. في هذه الندوة سوف نركز على التأثيرات الحالية للذكاء الاصطناعي على أنظمة التعليم، وبالإضافة إلى تأثيرات تطبيقات الذكاء الاصطناعي على تشكيل مستقبل التعليم على مستوى العالم، من خلال محورين مهمين. أولاً، استخدام الذكاء الاصطناعي في تحسين نواتج التعليم بالتركيز على دعم بيئات التعلم. ثانياً، استعراض تجارب الدول في استخدام الذكاء الاصطناعي في مجال التعليم من خلال عرض تجارب تطبيقية وعملية وطنية وإقليمية وعالمية في ذلك المجال. ونرجو من خلال التركيز على هذه المحاور وأوراق العمل التي سوف تعرض من قبل الخبراء المشاركين أن نعمل على إكساب الحضور والمشاركين المعرفة بشأن سياسات التعليم والمبادرات الناجحة المتعلقة بسياسات الذكاء الاصطناعي وممارساته في التعليم. السادة الحضور، لقد تبنى المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي بالشراكة مع مكتب التربية العربي تنظيم هذه الندوة تماشياً مع رؤية المركز منذ إنشائه في تنفيذ العديد من المشاريع والمبادرات والاستراتيجيات لنشر وإنتاج المعرفة الهادفة للتعريف بأرقى الممارسات وإيجاد وسيلة فاعلة لنقل المعلومات التعليمية والتوجهات العالمية وتبادلها والمشاركة بها، والاطلاع على أفضل الخبرات وآخر المستجدات، بما يساعد دولنا في المنطقة على اللحاق بالركب التقدم العلمي عن طريق الاستثمار الحكيم والموجه في تطوير أنظمتنا التعليمية. اختصاراً للوقت والجهد في وقت يشهد العالم أجمع زخماً قوياً من التغيرات المتسارعة في كافة المجالات، وما يتضمنه ذلك من تحديات جسام تفرض على كافة مناحي الحياة في الوطن العربي. والآن اسمحوا لي باسمكم جميعاً أن أدعو معالي حسين إبراهيم الحمادي وزير التربية والتعليم ورئيس مجلس إدارة المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي ليحدثنا من خلال رؤيته الاستراتيجية وقيادته لمنظومة التعليم في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، والتي يعتبر استثمار الذكاء الاصطناعي أحد أهم مكوناتها، فليتفضل معالي مشكورا.
مشكورة على المداخلة جميلة. في البداية إخواني اللي مشغل المايك يبنى المايك إذا ما بيتكلم أساس من لا يصير صدى في الصوت لأن في تداخلات في الأصوات. في البداية السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته، الأخوة والأخوات، الحضور الكريم، معالي أخي عبد الرحمن والأخوة والحضور، نتشرف اللقاء معكم اليوم. واليوم نحن نحييكم من مركز في هذه الندوة الإقليمية اللي فيها تعاون إيجابي ومثمر بين المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي والتعاون مع مكتب التربية العربي دول الخليج. طبعا نتكلم احنا عن الذكاء الاصطناعي. الذكاء الاصطناعي اخواني ليس شيء جديد، ولكن بدا من عام 1950 وفي تطور مستمر، وفي اخر 5 أو 10 سنوات بدا تاثيره يظهر بوضوح وجلي في المنظومه التعليميه وفي التخصصات التعليميه وفي تطبيقه في المنظومه التعليميه. وهذا اللقاء ان شاء الله سوف نستفيد في تبادل الافكار والمقترحات وكيف ممكن نستفيد ان كيف نطبق هذا بطريقه افضل واحسن في المستقبل. طبعا الناس تتكلم عن الذكاء الاصطناعي وفي تخوف منه انه بياخذ مكان الانسان وان الاله تطغي على العديد من الامور في حياتنا. اخواني الذكاء الاصطناعي عباره عن برمجيات يتم وضعها عن طريق الانسان، والانسان هو المتحكم الاساسي في ماذا يريد من هذه الانظمه. والانظمه طبعا هدفها هو تسهيل العمل وتسريع العمل وزياده جودته. فمثلا لو تطرقت لبعض الاشياء ممكن في التعليم اتمم بعض الانشطه والتصنيف والاختبارات والدرجات يعطيه مصداقيه اكثر ودقه افضل. كذلك البحث في البيانات، ولله الحمد في دوله الامارات ودول الخليج عندنا مراكز بيانات نجمع كثير بيانات عن الطلبه، وعندنا منظومات تعليميه ومنصات يعني ثانيه تجمع الملايين من نقاط البيانات. هاي تحتاج انسان عادي صعب يبحث فيها، فتحتاج منظومه او برمجيات ذكيه تبحث وتحلل هذه البيانات وتطلع بتوصيات. ولذلك ممكن في المستقبل ان نحن نساعد المعلم، ندعم القياده التربويه في المدرسه وكذلك في الجامعات ان يفردون في التعليم، يقوون نقاط الضعف عند ابناء الطلبه، يرفعون مهاراتهم، يرفعون من قدراتهم وامكانياتهم.
to raise skills of students.
هي سكر المايك مالك زين. شنو اللي مترجم يصير علينا. الشيء الثاني ان دور المعلم هو اساس العمليه التعليميه وعمود الفقري.
Teacher is the base.
فيمكن عندنا شغل المترجم بند لحظه شوي. انا اسمع صوت المترجم انا يدخل علي. بلد عندي ففي شيء غلط مع كل مره. المهم فدور المعلم هو الاساس والمحور في العمليه التعليميه وداعم لها، والذكاء الصناعي والمنصات هي داعمه للمعلم. يجب المعلم ان يكون هو القائد، هو المشرف على المنظومه التعليميه، وهذه المنصات تساعده في تسهيل عمله وتمكينه من تحقيق يعني تحصيل افضل واحسن لابناء الطلبه، ويراعي خصوصيتهم ويراعي قدراتهم وامكانياتهم ويفرض التعليم لهم ان شاء الله. طبعا في دوله الامارات ولله الحمد في دعم كثير للمنظومه التعليميه وتطوير المنظومه التعليميه، واطلقت الامارات استراتيجيه الامارات الذكاء الاصطناعي في عام 2017. كذلك عندنا احنا العديد من الجامعات تم تعديل معايير الاعتماد للعديد من البرامج ودمج الذكاء الاصطناعي والبرمجه والمهارات التحليل والمنطق وتحليل البيانات لابناء الطلبه في الجامعات والكليات. واطلقت دوله الامارات اول جامعه في العالم جامعه بحثيه متخصصه في الذكاء الاصطناعي تعطي منح مجانا لجميع دول العالم، وهي جامعه الشيخ محمد بن زايد للذكاء الاصطناعي. ومن هنا دعوه للجميع عند رغبه يدرس الماجستير والدكتوراه، الجامعه ابوابها مفتوحه. كذلك تم تطوير بعض البرامج مع جامعه خليفه وجامعه الامارات والجامعات الاخرى في دوله الامارات في تطوير مستمر لادماج هذا المحور. انا اسميه المحور الخامس في منظومه التعليم، لان التعليم يبنى على محاور علوم اساسيه واصبحت البرمجه واسلوب التفكير المنطقي والتحليل والسيستم ابروتش انظمه نظام الانظمه في التحليل هي مهاره اساسيه صارت في ابناء الطلبه. ولله الحمد في دوله الامارات نحن بدينا عندنا مصفوفه مهارات الطلبه من الرياض الى الصف الثاني عشر في البرمجه والذكاء الاصطناعي والمنطق والتحليل والبيانات، وطبق هذا المنظومه من 3 سنوات وجاري تحديثها سنويا. كذلك ولله الحمد نمتلك شركه في دوله الامارات، شركه الف للتعليم، وهي شركه متميزه تطبق الذكاء الاصطناعي، وجميع المدارس الحكوميه تطبق في هذه المنصه بتميز، ودائما التجربه والتطوير مستمر في هذا المجال. ما يميز دوله الامارات ان نحن دائما نبحث عن الافضل، ودائما نطور ونحسن، ودائما نطمح للمركز الاول في اي شيء. فوجود هذه المنصات وهذه المقدرات تساهم في التسريع في وصول الى الامارات لاهدافها المئويه ان شاء الله. طبعا توفير اخواني واخواتي البيئه الخصبه لهذه المنظومات والتعاون والتساند بين جميع الجهات، تمكين المنظومه التعليميه للانتقال الى منظومه حديثه ومتطوره تواكب المستقبل، تحديث مهارات وقدرات وامكانيات الطلاب في استيعاب هذه التكنولوجيا الحديثه. يعني انت الحين يجب عليك اي طالب بالمدارس او الجامعات عنده القدره والامكانيات انه يستفيد من هذه القدرات التكنولوجيه الضخمه التي في السنوات القادمه ستكون على ارض الواقع، وممكنات لتسهيل العمل وتطويره وانجازه. اشكركم على حسن الاستماع، متمنيا للحظوظ ان شاء الله التوفيق والنجاح وتحقيق الاستفاده المثلى من هذه المنتديات اللي يتم اعدادها بالتشارك بين المركز والمكتب العربي. ونشكر الجميع على حسن الاستماع، نتمنى التوفيق لكم، وطبعا دوله الامارات ووزاره التربيه والتعليم في خدمتكم، واي استفسارات واي معلومات اضافيه تحتاجونها رجاء عدم التردد والتواصل عن طريق المكتب العربي او عن طريق مهارات المركز التربوي، او التواصل مباشره مع وزاره التربيه والتعليم في دوله الامارات. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله تعالى وبركاته. نسمع صوت مهرة.
أستاذ مهرة you're muted.
مهرة ميوت. مهرة ميوت. شغل المايك.
الصوت.
أستاذ مهرة you're muted.
انطلقت مهرة.
الصوت أستاذة مهرة.
مسموحة منكم. نشكر معالي حسين الحمادي على هذه الكلمة التي اطلعنا من خلالها على جهود قيادة دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة في تبني الاستراتيجيات الوطنية للذكاء الاصطناعي، مما انعكس على تطوير المنظومة التعليمية من خلال تبني برامج متخصصة في هذا المجال على مستوى مؤسسات التعليم العام والعالي، وإطلاق جامعة متخصصة في الذكاء الاصطناعي. والآن وانطلاقاً من الدور الريادي الذي ظل يمارسه مكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج منذ إنشائه من خلال طرح القضايا التي تسهم في تطوير وتحسين النظم التعليمية في الدول الأعضاء في مجلس دول التعاون، فإني باسمكم باسمكم أدعو معالي عبد الرحمن العاصمي المدير العام لمكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج لإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل مشكورا.
هل الحديث الفرصة لي ما سمعت الدكتورة مهرة؟ السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام، تفضل دكتور عبد الرحمن، المجال لك.
الصوت مسموع؟ مسموع
دكتور وواضح.
أولاً عذراً، ترى إذا يحصل تقطعات لأن النت ترى خارج المملكة، فبالتالي أحياناً النت ما يكون متصل، لكن إن شاء الله تعذرونا. الصوت واضح ها؟
نعم واضح، تفضل دكتور.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولاً معالي الأخ الكريم المهندس حسين الحمادي رئيس مجلس إدارة المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي وزير التربية والتعليم بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، سعادة الأخت الكريمة مهرة المطيوعي مديرة المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي، الإخوة الزملاء المتحدثين والمشاركين، السلام عليكم جميعاً ورحمة الله وبركاته. بداية أعبر عن اعتزازي الشخصي واعتزاز مكتب التربية العربي في هذه الشراكة المهنية والتعاون المثمر بعون الله مع المركز الإقليمي
انقطع الصوت.
دكتور عبد الرحمن الصوت انقطع.
للتخطيط التربوي. أيها السيد، هي لمستحدثات الثورة الصناعية الرابعة له مكانا في صميم أعمال الشركات والمؤسسات وفي جميع المجالات الصناعية والاقتصادية والإعلامية ومجالات الاتصال وجميع جوانب الحياة المختلفة. وبالتأكيد في مجال التربية والتعليم من المتوقع توظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي من أجل تعزيز التعليم والتعلم ودعم بيئات التعلم وتلبية حاجات الطلبة وإدارة المحتوى التعليمي وتفاعل المعلم والمتعلم والتقييم والتقويم المبني على بيانات ومعلومات ترفع مستوى الصدق والثبات. أيها الإخوة، يولي مكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج تلك التطورات المتسارعة والمستجدات أولوية قصوى لتوظيفها ودمجها في التعليم من خلال مجموعة من البرامج والأنشطة والفعاليات والشراكات، مستندا على طموحات ورؤى وتوجيهات أصحاب الجلالة والسمو قادة دوله ورعاة مسيرة التربية والتعليم حفظهم الله. إن التعليم في الدول
دكتور عبد الرحمن.
الأعضاء بالمكتب يشهد تقدما ملحوظا التعليمية في العالم تعاني جائحة كورونا. كبت جهود الدول الأعضاء في هذا المجال ودعمها بعدد من البرامج والفعاليات التي توظف التقنية في التعليم العام، خصوصا ما يتعلق بمجالات الذكاء الاصطناعي وجعله ضمن خيارات التعليم والتعلم. أيها السيدات والسادة، إن مكتب التربية العربي وهو يرصد ويتابع التأثيرات الحالية للذكاء الاصطناعي على التعليم، يأمل في إحداث تحول حقيقي ونوعي في مجال توظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي في برامج التعليم، انطلاقا من إيمانه العميق بتأثير الثورة الصناعية الرابعة على جميع المجالات، حيث ستحاكي الآلة الوظائف الإدراكية للإنسان كالتعلم والتخطيط وتوقع المخاطر وتقديم الحلول الاستباقية ومعالجة البيانات الضخمة بطريقة أسرع من الإنسان. عندها يجب أن نسعى لتحويل التعلم من سياق إلى آخر بصورة أكثر تقدما وأسرع تفاعلا مع التغيرات، وعليه
يبدو أن النت حرمنا من صوتك دكتور.
فقد استجاب المكتب لهذا التوجه بطرح مشروع متكامل على مستوى دول مسمى المرصد الخليجي للذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم والسياسات المتعلقة بتوظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي، هدف تقديم المساندة الفنية لواضع السياسات والخطط التعليمية. وبلا شك أن تكنولوجيا الذكاء الاصطناعي ستلعب دورا بالغ الأهمية في مجال التعليم والتعلم، ولن تكون مجرد تقنية عابرة، لذا لا بد من اتخاذ قرارات أفضل وبسرعة أكبر حول الاستفادة من إمكانيات الذكاء الاصطناعي في التربية والتعليم بما يحقق التطلعات ويوصل إلى الغايات. في الختام أكرر الحقيقة شكري وتقديري لمعالي المهندس حسين الحمادي على ما يجده مكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج من دعم ومساندة ومتابعة، كما أن الشكر موصول لسعادة الأخت الكريمة مهرة الطيوعي مديرة المركز على جهودها وحرصها في تعزيز الشراكة والتكامل بين المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي ومكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج.
مشكلة.
والشكر والتقدير موصول لجميع المشاركين الندوة الساحة التعليمية بالجديد، وأكرر شكري وتقديري لكم ولتنظيم هذه الندوة، والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
نشكر معالي عبد الرحمن العاصمي على هذه الكلمة التي ركز فيها على استراتيجيات استثمار الذكاء الاصطناعي، وعرفنا على البرامج والمشاريع التي يقوم بها المكتب بالتربية العربي في توظيف التقنية، ومن أهمها المرصد الخليجي في الذكاء الاصطناعي والذي يأتي في مسيرة استثمار الذكاء الاصطناعي في مجالات التعليم، وأكد على أهمية استثمار هذا المجال في تطوير الأنظمة التعليمية. ونؤكد له بأن العمل المشترك بين المركز الإقليمي ومكتب التربية العربي سوف يستمر تحت قيادة معالي حسين الحمادي وبتوجيهاته الشخصية وتحت قيادتكم دكتور عبد الرحمن.
بإذن الله.
والآن سوف أتنحى جانباً وأترك المجال للدكتور عبد الله السحمة المستشار بمكتب التربية العربي لتولي دفة قيادة الجلسة الأولى من هذه الندوة، فليتفضل مشكوراً. تفضل دكتور عبد الله، المجال لك.
شكرا جزيلا، شكرا جزيلا سعادة الأستاذة مهرة. أتمنى أن يكون الصوت واضح. الصوت واضح؟
اي واضح واضح.
الصوت واضح.
قبل أن نبدأ يعني نريد أن ننوه أنه يوجد ترجمة بين اللغتين العربية والإنجليزية. يمكن اختيار اللغة المناسبة بالضغط على الأيقونة الترجمة في أسفل الشاشة. And before we start, just a reminder for those who joined recently that there is a translation, and you can choose the appropriate language by clicking on the globe button at the bottom of the screen. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. الحضور، المتحدثين، المنظمين، أصحاب المعالي، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا عبد الله السحمة من مكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج العربية، ويسعدني إدارة هذه الجلسة الأولى، وأرحب بكم جميعا. ولا يفوتني قبل أن نبدأ الجلسة أن أقدم من الشكر أجزله وأتمه لأصحاب المعالي والسعادة على كلماتهم التوجيهية الوافية، والتي إنجاز لنا أن نقتبس منها معالي حسين الحمادي الذي وضع المعلم أولا ووضعه هو الأساس، وأضاف أو اقترح إضافة محورا خامسا لمحاور التعليم المهمة وهو الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم. ومعالي عبد الرحمن العاصمي المدير العام لمكتب التربية، والذي نوه عن وجود مشروع كبير بمسمى المرصد الخليجي للذكاء الاصطناعي لتوظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم. الذكاء الاصطناعي دخل الحقيقة في حياتنا من أوسع الأبواب، وهو يلعب دورا مهما في جميع المجالات، والتعليم ليس استثناء من هذه المجالات. ومع أنه جلب معه العديد من الفرص والتسهيلات الهائلة، إلا أنه كما ذكر معالي حسين الحمادي أيضا جلب معه تحديات ومخاطر كبيرة. السؤال الذي يطرح نفسه على الجميع: كيف نستفيد من فرص الذكاء الاصطناعي وإيجابياته ونقلل من مخاطره وتحدياته؟ كيف نوظفه في تطوير التعليم؟ ما هي آليات بناء الفهم المشترك بين صناع السياسات التربوية والممارسين حول الذكاء الاصطناعي؟ كيف نستثمر منتجات الذكاء الاصطناعي في المساهمة في تحقيق أهداف الأجندة العالمية للتنمية المستدامة، وعلى وجه الخصوص الهدف الرابع منها ضمان التعليم الجيد والمتكافئ للجميع وتوفير فرص التعلم مدى الحياة للجميع؟ ما هو أثر الذكاء الاصطناعي على بيئات التعليم والتعلم؟ ما هو أثره على تفريد التعليم؟ كل هذه التساؤلات وغيرها سنحاول مطارحتها ومناقشتها مع متحدثين المختصين والخبراء في المجال. تتكون الجلسة الأولى من 3 أوراق فنية. مدة الجلسة 1 ساعة و25 دقيقة موزعة بين الأوراق ال3، وسيخصص الربع ساعة الأخيرة لإجابة تساؤلاتكم، والتي يمكنكم إرسالها في مساحة الأسئلة والأجوبة. الورقة الأولى لهذه الجلسة مدتها 20 دقيقة. الحقيقة أنا أحاول أتريث في الحديث حتى أعطي مجال للترجمة. مدتها 20 دقيقة، وهي حول استخدام وتوظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم. سيقدمها علم من أعلام المجال دكتور وين هومز، ووين يحمل درجة الدكتوراه من جامعة أكسفورد، وهو مستشار وباحث بمركز الأبحاث الدولي للذكاء الاصطناعي في اليونسكو. عمل في التعليم طوال حياته، ومؤخرا كرس أبحاثه حول توظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم. له العديد من المؤلفات، آخرها تطبيقات الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم والتعلم، وكتاب أخلاقيات الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم، وكتاب الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم دليل لصانع السياسات التربوية. قدم الكثير من المحاضرات والندوات في مجال الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم حول العالم. الآن دكتور وين هولمز, the floor is yours with 20 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. If I may, I will share my screen.
Sure.
So hopefully you can see my first slide.
That's clear.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to begin by thanking the Regional Centre for Educational Planning and the Arab Bureau of Education for the Gulf States for inviting me to be part of this event. To introduce myself, I'm a social scientist, a learning scientist, and I've been involved in AI and education for almost 10 years. But my role is to bring a critical studies perspective, thinking about the very many challenges and trying to get behind the hyperbole. So AI brings some amazing possibilities to education. You'll hear many claiming that their AI tool is designed solely to support children's education. But I'd ask you to consider those claims carefully. This is a $6 billion market and money talks loudly. In fact, I often have to raise my voice a little just to be heard, just to introduce a critical perspective. So the connections between AI and education are actually more complex than many suggest. And as I've said, there's a lot of hype and a lot of exaggeration. So to begin my talk, I'm first going to explore some of the connections, then I'm going to challenge some of the hype. To begin with, I like to think of the connections between AI and education in terms of 3 buckets. In reality, these buckets overlap, but the categorization is still very helpful. Firstly, we have learning with AI. May be divided into student-facing, teacher-facing, and system-facing AI. Secondly, we have learning about AI, how AI works, how to create it, the techniques and technologies. And thirdly, we have preparing for AI, preparing to live with AI and ensuring human values and the ethics of artificial intelligence. So to begin with then, let's have a look at learning with AI, and I'll start with system-facing AI. So these are the kind of technologies that automate parts of school administration, university administration. They include things like recruitment, admissions, timetabling, learning management, and this is growing all the time. But moving on to student-facing AI, and there's actually many, many different types. Firstly, we have the so-called intelligent tutoring systems, and we're going to hear from 2 of the companies that are listed on the right today. But there's also dialogue-based tutoring systems, automatic writing evaluation, learning network orchestrators, language learning with AI, and chatbots. So a huge range of different ways in which AI has been developed to support students directly. And what about my third category, teacher-facing? Well, the reality is there's very little. In fact, this is one of the few that I've been able to identify. So this is a tool from IBM that enables teachers to quickly and easily find information and resources to support whatever they want to teach. But the fact that this is only one compared to the student-facing AI, I think is a really important point. So far, the vast majority of efforts in AI in education research and development has been in taking on board teacher tasks, essentially replacing the teacher in the classroom. Far fewer, only this one and maybe a couple of others, are actually looking at how do we use AI to support teachers directly. Moving on then to my second bucket, and this is learning about AI, an important area that's often not part of this conversation. But learning about AI involves universities, and universities around the world have a huge range of different courses, teaching students, advanced students, on how to develop and create AI. But we also have courses such as this, which is Elements of AI, developed by a university in Finland, which is designed to be used by all citizens to bring them up to speed with what AI means and how it works and what we need to consider. In schools, in the US, we have AI for K-12. And this is a group who are working to put together curricula so that teachers can teach their students in K-12 in schools about AI, how it works and how it can be used. And in UNESCO, where I've made a contribution, we also have this website where you can find different resources about AI, about the teaching of AI, but also we're engaging in various other projects. And Dr. Miao will be speaking later, and I'm sure he'll be giving you more details about this. So moving on then to my third bucket, preparing for AI. And the question is, what resources are there out there? What teaching is going on? What curriculum is there to support all citizens, particularly younger citizens, in learning to live with AI, helping to ensure that the human values of AI are maintained and strengthened, helping to ensure that the AI that we use is done with an ethical perspective. And the reality is that there's, again, very little happening in this area, which is something that I urge all governments to be thinking about very carefully. So it's not just about what tools can we use to support students. It's not just about what tools can we use to support teachers. It's also about how do we ensure that our citizens across the countries are learning what it means to live in a world where AI is becoming increasingly impactful. So that's my very quick introduction to the vast range of different work that's going on and that needs to go on in the connection between AI and education. But moving on to AI and education and the hype. And as I've said, I see my role as bringing a critical studies perspective and trying to break through that hype. But now that we have that better understanding, what else do we need to consider? What are the claims made by many AI and education companies? And how do they stand up to scrutiny? Well, I've done a survey of many different AI and education companies' websites to see the claims that they make. And one of the claims that most of them make is that their tools are intelligent. But I have to tell you, they're not intelligent. The reality is that no AI system today, in education or elsewhere, comes anywhere close to human intelligence. And no AI education tool is anywhere near as intelligent as a human teacher. In fact, AI systems in education are extremely limited in what they can achieve. I accept sometimes they might appear intelligent, but that's a long way from actually being intelligent. It's actually all smoke and mirrors, statistics and pattern finding, and we mustn't allow ourselves to be fooled. And what about this claim? That AI in the classroom will save teacher time. In fact, that claim has been made about education technologies for almost 100 years, and it's not happened yet. Of course, AI, they tell us, is different, and AI tools will finally save teacher time. Now, I'm a teacher, and I know that most teachers would love a tool that takes care of their marking. But this ignores how much a teacher learns about their students when we read what our students have written. It's doing that that gives us insights into our students that no dashboard will ever give. So maybe AI will save teacher time, although there's actually no evidence for that at the moment. But what cost? At what cost to the quality of teaching and learning? The third claim is that AI will personalize learning. This is something we hear about all the time. Again, it's an ambition that's been around for almost 100 years, but it's recently re-emerged from Silicon Valley, but it completely misses the point. The AI tools that we hear about might provide each student with their own individual pathway through the materials, but they still take every student to the same fixed learning outcomes as everyone else. For me, this is a weak understanding of personalization. Real personalization is not about pathways, but about helping each individual student to achieve their own potential, to self-actualize, which is something that no existing AI tool in education does. In any case, the data these so-called individual pathways are based on are averages. And while they might be applicable to groups, their usefulness for individual students is often questionable. Education is also about collaboration and the other social interaction aspects of teaching and learning, which is the opposite of the so-called personalization that so many AI and education tools claim, but mostly fail to provide. It all depends on what you want your education system to achieve. Do you want students with lots of exam certificates? Or do you want independent, creative, and critical thinkers who are able to help society develop most effectively for the common good? That's the choice.
For speakers, for schools, etc. And we are
not only that, but almost every existing commercial AI education tool adopts a behaviorist or an instructionist approach. This is seen as an extremely primitive approach to teaching and learning, which involves spoon-feeding information while avoiding failure, and which ignores more than 60 years of pedagogical development. And in so doing, they disempower teachers, turning them all too often into mere technology facilitators. Again, this misses the point, ignoring the amazing skills that human teachers have that no AI tool can replicate. These tools also often undermine student agency. The student has to do what the AI requires, meaning that there's no opportunity for them to develop self-regulation skills or to self-actualize. In my opinion, the problem comes from the focus of most AI and education companies on the symptoms rather than the causes of the problems that education faces. The symptoms are key: children not receiving the education they deserve. And using technology might help some of them, but the real issue, the causes, are the lack of qualified teachers and the use of poor pedagogic practices, which the AI tools don't even begin to address. Putting technologies such as AI tools into settings where, for example, there aren't enough experienced teachers is a techno-solutionist approach, which perpetuates rather than solves the real problems. And I worry that this is the logical conclusion of current approaches to AI in education. When a child's born, why don't we simply embed a microchip with all the world's knowledge in their brain? Or perhaps ultimately we could do it with a pill. This might seem an exaggeration, but neither is beyond the realm of possibility. Elon Musk in the US is developing brain-based computer chips. However, again, this misses the point. It conflates education and learning with knowledge acquisition. But education is so much more than that. But even if you reject my concerns, if you think I'm making a fuss over nothing, but even if you reject my concerns, if you think I'm making a fuss over nothing, you still don't really know if any of the AI tools actually do what they claim to do. Where's the evidence? The reality is that almost no AI and education companies' products have been independently evaluated. Everything you read, it's all just marketing. If the AI tools are so good, where are the robust, independent, randomized controlled trials. There are almost none. In fact, I know of one company that even turned down an opportunity to have their product independently evaluated, even though it would have been fully funded. The question is, what are they trying to hide? Other tools do slightly different things. Some, for example, claim to detect the student's emotional state. Now, the aim of this, like all AI in education, is entirely laudable. To move a student here from a negative emotional state to a positive emotional state to enhance their learning. But using AI tools to detect student emotion when it works, which it mostly doesn't, I would argue crosses a final privacy frontier, looking inside a child's brain. As does this, the use of AI to monitor or survey student attention. In fact, although this picture is clearly from China, this technology was banned in Chinese schools a couple of years ago, but it's still being developed and used elsewhere. Finally, during the pandemic, as education moved online, many assessments also moved online, and exam monitoring or e-proctoring companies saw their businesses grow massively. But the use of e-proctoring is hugely controversial. It's accused of intrusion, failing to work properly, preventing students taking their exams, and exacerbating mental health problems, to just name a few. The point is that this is another example of automating poor pedagogic practices rather than using AI to develop innovative approaches. Why are we using AI to facilitate exams, which we all know are shallow and less than useful? Instead, where is the AI that is innovating how we assess and accredit learning? Having said all that, I admit without hesitation that what some AI tools have achieved in education is impressive. The researchers in particular have overcome some huge technical challenges represented by this mountain. But the tools that are currently available are still very limited, and frequently they're highly questionable. As I've mentioned, AI tools for use in education today all too often reduce student agency, are intrusive, are not really personalized, and they undermine teachers and teaching. In fact, they ignore the bigger mountain of possibilities that AI might help achieve. Rather than automating poor pedagogic practices, AI developers need to leverage AI's amazing capabilities to innovate teaching and learning without compromising pedagogy or human values, to empower students and teachers, to support inclusion and equity, and for the common good. To give just one example,
1 minute,
instead of pretending that an AI tool is better than a teacher, or that an AI tool supports the teacher, where is the AI-powered teacher virtual exoskeleton that helps them become super teachers? So far, there's very little research into such a thing and no known commercial products. So in conclusion,
please,
AI is clever, but not as clever as many people claim. AI is already having a major impact in education, and it has the potential to transform education for good, but also for bad. We need to avoid simply automating poor pedagogic practices. We need to empower teachers and promote student agency. We need to recognize that embedding commercial AI tools in classrooms is a commercialization of education by the back door. And we need to ensure that AI in education meets real needs and addresses the common good. Thank you very much for listening to me.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Wayne, for this valuable presentation. شكرا جزيلا دكتور وين على هذا العرض الرائع. والحقيقة إذا أردنا أن نختصر هذا العرض فهو يكمن في التوازن بين ما يمكن أن يقدمه الذكاء الاصطناعي وبين ما يمكن أن يقدمه المعلم أو الذكاء الإنساني. دكتور وين استعرض أمثلة كثيرة لاستخدام الذكاء الاصطناعي للمتعلم وللمعلم، وأيضا استعرض أمثلة من فنلند ومن منظمة اليونسكو، وذهب أبعد من ذلك أن هناك أيضا كثير من المحاولات حتى يستفيد المواطن العادي وليس المتعلم ولا المعلم. استعرض كثير من الأبحاث حول هذا الأمر. في نهاية الأمر هناك كثير من التحديات، هناك كثير من الفرص، ولكن بالتوازن يمكن توظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي بالشكل المطلوب، مثل التقنية التي سبق أن وظفت من عشرات السنين. نعتذر عن الخلل الموجود في الترجمة والتداخل بين الترجمة العربية والإنجليزية، ويجري الآن العمل على إصلاح هذا الخلل. بعد أن استمعنا للورقة الأولى حول استثمار الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم، ننتقل الآن إلى علم آخر من أعلام المجال لنتعرف معه على أساليب تكييف التعليم والتعلم لتلبية حاجات المتعلمين. مدة هذه الورقة 30 دقيقة، يقدمها بروفيسور مايك شاربس. وبروف مايك هو بروفيسور تقنيات التعليم في الجامعة البريطانية المفتوحة. خبراته تتضمن التركيز على تكنولوجيا بيئات التعلم مع التركيز على البعد الإنساني في التكنولوجيا وترابط وتكامل الجانب التقني مع الجانب الإنساني. دشن سلسلة مؤتمر التعلم المتنقل، رئيس مؤسس للجمعية الدولية للتعليم المتنقل، يعمل مستشارا لدى العديد من الشركات والمنظمات الدولية كشركة التعليم الإلكتروني للمستقبل واليونسكو واليونيسيف. هو محرر مجلة الذكاء الاصطناعي، مؤسس التدريس الإبداعي لتكنولوجيا التعليم. لديه العديد من الأبحاث في تكنولوجيا التعليم، تفوق 300 بحث ودراسة. له العديد من المؤلفات، آخرها 40 طريقة علمية جديدة للتدريس والتعليم. Now, Prof. Mike, the floor is yours with 30 minutes, please. And I really appreciate if you can stick with the time, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that introduction. I'm delighted to be involved in this seminar. I'll share my screen first.
Sure.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Good. So hello, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Mike Sharples from the Institute of Educational Technology at the Open University, the largest university in the UK, where our students are taught at a distance in a research-based university. My background is in artificial intelligence. My PhD was on the design of tutoring systems. And that makes one important point, which is that artificial intelligence in education is not new. It has been around for over 40 years, even though there are new developments. What I want to do is in some ways to build on what Wayne Holmes has said, but perhaps to take a more positive note. But I want to start from his very important reservations that AI in education is far from intelligent at the moment, and that it will not replace teachers. And I want to start from those two important points that he made. I'm going to focus on AI applications in supporting learning environments. So this is a diagram of a learning environment. And as you can see, a learning environment is complex. it's shown from a teacher's perspective. So a teacher needs to understand the characteristics of learners, their goals, their prior knowledge. Teacher needs to be able to create relevant content to support students in developing their skills, such as skills of discussion, practical activities. Needs to support each individual learner through direct feedback, through counseling. Needs to provide resources such as assistance and technology, and needs to assess the students through projects, through essays, through tests. So a learning environment is complex. And all parts of a learning environment must interact to support learners. Now, AI can have a role in supporting a learning environment as an assistant, as a support for a teacher. And these are some of the ways in which artificial intelligence may support a learning environment. It could provide more personalized learning, engaging content to the student, offer rapid feedback, provide more effective assessment, offer analytics to support the teacher and the administrators in understanding student progress, and providing assistance, direct assistance to a teacher. So there are possibilities for AI to support a learning environment. But the first point I want to make is that all of these elements of a learning environment must act and interact together. And so it's not sufficient just to provide an AI that enables one part of a learning environment and ignores the rest. We need to develop technology and support for all the aspects and all the interacting aspects of a learning environment. And that's a difficult task, a difficult challenge. The next thing I want to say is that there are two distinct types of artificial intelligence, and it's important not to confuse the two. The first is symbolic or rule-based artificial intelligence. And what that does is it provides a computer model of the teacher and the learner, of the teaching curriculum and the way that the curriculum develops, and of the learner and the learner's skills and the learner's evolving knowledge. It's called knowledge-based tutoring. And one advantage of knowledge-based tutoring is that it's possible to inspect the mind of the student's evolving knowledge. And it's capable of common sense reasoning. But symbolic rule-based artificial intelligence can be very inflexible and limited. A teacher does much more than just develop and deliver the curriculum and monitor students' progress. There is much more that a teacher does in terms of enabling student growth, conversation, collaboration. So symbolic rule-based artificial intelligence, in terms of the flexibility and the breadth of teaching, is inflexible and limited. The other type of artificial intelligence that has been making news headlines recently is machine learning. Now, machine learning is powerful in that it learns from data. And the more data there is, the more the system can learn. It can provide analytics and assistance to teachers, to administrators, and to students. It can be very flexible in general. It can answer questions, it can provide summaries, it can engage in general purpose teaching. But there are some important limitations that we need to recognize. Firstly, machine learning is only as good as its data. And if that data is biased because it only uses a limited data set or a data set which has a particular cultural perspective, then the assistance and the analytics will be biased. It's not capable of common sense reasoning, the sort of everyday reasoning that we do about the world. And importantly, you can't see into its mind. You can't say, what is it understanding? What is its representation of the student and the student's knowledge? So each type of artificial intelligence has its advantages and disadvantages. Now, in the future, we may be able to develop hybrid AI systems that combine rule-based and machine learning, but we're not there yet. What I want to do quickly is to give you some examples of AI, current AI, to support learning environments. And I'll give you 3 examples to ground what I'm saying. The first is a cognitive tutor. The second is predictive analytics. And the third is chatbots. So first, cognitive tutor. So there's a company, Carnegie Learning, that was founded in 1997. So it has a good track record of AI in education. And it has developed a number of rule-based AI tutors that provide personalized, just-in-time feedback to students. And on the left here, you can see an example of that, of a student who is being taught about how to interpret a graph. It provides contextual hints. So as the student works through the exercise, if the student gets the wrong answer or asks for help, it can give hints, advice that is relevant to that particular question. So it can track the student's evolving knowledge and give hints and suggestions. It adapts to the learner's skills. There have been evaluations of the cognitive tutor, mostly from its own developers, but there have been some external evaluations of it, which suggests that it can be equivalent to a human tutor in terms of the student's learning outcomes and better than a conventional class. But, and here are the important reservations, it's limited to rule-governed subjects, ones that can be specified in terms of rules, such as algebra, computer programming, or geometry. It has been many years in development, 20 years or more, to develop these cognitive tutors. And most importantly, it supplements, not replaces a human teacher. It isn't designed to replace a human teacher, but to support a human teacher, for example, for homework practice. The second one I'm going to discuss briefly is predictive analytics. So on the left, you can see a screen from a predictive analytics system that was developed at the Open University where I work, called OU Analyze. It predicts student outcomes based on the student performance early in the course. So as the student progresses with a university course, it can monitor the student activity and it can use that monitoring to make predictions about what the student will do next. It combines 4 different predictive models, rather like weather forecasting models, but instead of forecasting the weather, it forecasts the student activity. And it can forecast, for example, whether the student is likely to submit an assignment and what the performance of the student will be on the next assignment. So it can give advice to teachers, administrators, and students. But one big question is, what do you do with that advice? For example, you don't want to say to a student, we think you're going to fail. That's not going to help the student to be able to progress, to help the student's confidence. We need to use the advice very carefully and very sensitively. So one of the ways in which the OU Analyze system is used is to recommend activity to students based on the performance of similar students. Say, at this point in your work, other students have done this and been successful. We suggest that you might do the same. So being able to use predictive analytics in a sensitive way that supports student progress is really important. The last one I want to mention is chatbots. So chatbots have become, at the moment, quite important in education. A number of companies have set up chatbots. A chatbot is a conversational agent using artificial intelligence. At the moment, most chatbots have been for example, for administration. So here is one that responds to a student who wants to take an online course. So the student says, can I get a refund on a paid course? And the chatbot responds, we want you to be satisfied. So if you're not happy with the course, you can request a full refund. And then the student says, how long will it take for my refund to arrive? And it gives a response. This is a rule-based chatbot based on picking up items in the language that the student uses, firing a rule and producing a rule-based response. So it's very good for things like supporting students who want to apply for a course or have very predictable questions. Now I'm going to show you a very different sort of chatbot. This is one that's based on machine learning. And I said there are two sorts of AI. So machine learning uses a huge amount of data to provide a more flexible environment. This is a program called GPT-3 that was developed by a company called OpenAI, funded among other people by Elon Musk. And this is my interaction with GPT-3. All I did was give it two example questions and answers. And then I had this conversation with it. So it's a very general purpose chatbot, a very general purpose conversational agent. So I asked it, how can AI applications support learning environments? And it responded, AI applications help to personalize learning, bring a network of knowledge, analyze large data sets, monitor students' progress, and assist teachers. Then I asked, can AI applications replace teachers? And the chatbot responded, no, AI applications can support teachers. And then interestingly, what it did was then it carried on asking questions as well as answering them. So it carried on as if it was me asking, are there any AI applications in education? What are the advantages of AI in education? So it's a very powerful conversational partner. And it can give the appearance of having a lot of knowledge, but it's only as good as its data. And it doesn't have a general understanding of the student, of the student's knowledge, of the student's progress, and the student in context. So it gives the appearance of being very intelligent, but is not necessarily. And to finish, I want to say three things. One is there is a possibility to develop hybrid AI in education that might combine the best of rule-based artificial intelligence and machine learning, rule-based for specific answers to questions, and machine learning for more general answers. But that's still a long way away. Secondly, AI applications could enhance education, but they will not replace teachers because there is much more that a teacher does than just track a student's knowledge and answer questions. And the challenge is to integrate these into a learning environment that empowers and supports teachers and learners and administrators. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, and I hope there will be time for questions later.
Thank you so much, Prof. Mike, for this fruitful presentation. شكرا جزيلا. البروف مايك قدم عرض حقيقة مميز. تتجول بنا في أمثلة عديدة من استخدام ما زال في تداخل في الترجمة. تجول بنا في تطبيقات الذكاء الاصطناعي في دعم بيئة التعلم، المحتوى، المهارات، دعم المتعلم، صفات المتعلم. هناك تداخل في الترجمة الزملاء في
لا بس انت في الانتربريتيشن اختار اوف الانتربريتيشن ما في
في النهاية هو فرق لنا بين نوعين من أنواع الذكاء الاصطناعي. الجميل في الأمر أن الذكاء الاصطناعي نفسه سئل هل ستستبدل المعلم يوما ما؟ فأجاب لا، أنا سأساعده ولن أكون بديلا عنه. ويجب أن نتأكد من هذه الإجابة لا يغيرها مع الزمن. الأمر الآخر طبعا البروفيسور مايك وضع 3 حلول في قضية استخدام الذكاء الاصطناعي. أهمها هو أن يكون هناك هايبرد والمقصود به هو المزيج بين الذكاء الاصطناعي والذكاء البشري. الآن ننتقل إلى الورقة الثالثة مع خبير من خبراء المجال، مدتها 20 دقيقة. عنوانها الذكاء الاصطناعي والتعليم، آخر الأبحاث، الأمثلة والدروس المستفادة. سيقدمها الدكتور ماتلو، ودكتور ماتلو أستاذ مساعد لتكنولوجيا التعليم في كلية لندن الجامعية. تركزت أبحاثها على تطوير تطبيقات الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم ودعم التعلم. يعمل مع اليونسكو في تكنولوجيا التعليم والذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم. باحث ومحرر في المجلة البريطانية لتكنولوجيا التعليم وللمجلة الدولية لتفاعل الأطفال مع الكمبيوتر. Now the floor is yours, Dr. Matlu, with 20 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah. If I may, I will share my screen as well.
Sure.
Thank you. Can you see my screen, please?
Sure, yeah, it's clear.
Good afternoon, everyone. Many thanks for the invitation. It is an honor and absolute pleasure to be here. Today, I will be very briefly talking about AI implications for education with an intention to give a broad introduction to the field and present 3 key lessons learned from recent research developments in the field that can help us utilize AI more wisely, perhaps, in education. I would like to resonate with most of the key messages that have been presented with the previous 2 presenters, and particularly with regards to the AI's potential limitations and how much they should be considered and taken into account before we take any decisions. But my intention is to actually give a little bit of a detailed scene of what is going on in terms of academic research within AI in education, which might hopefully help us to pay forward in a more evidence-informed manner, as has been also argued by other 2 presenters. I was planning to give the broad introduction of the AI implications with regards to 3 categories, but as this has been well covered by my colleague Wayne in his presentation, I will be skipping this slide with regards to the 3 categories of AI implications. But I wanted to highlight the fact that as part of this short talk, I will be mainly focusing on the design and use of AI technologies to tackle educational challenges, whereas highlighting the fact that educating people about AI so that they can use them effectively and efficiently, as well as innovating education systems, are equally important dimensions of AI in education. Now, in this theme of how do we design AI technologies that would help us tackle key challenges in teaching and learning, one of the main research questions revolves around the appropriate role of AI in education. And in my work, similar to the positionings of the previous 2 speakers, I have been defending the argument that AI in education should be used to augment human capabilities rather than replacing them. And this is a very important point that should be significantly vocalized as many times as possible. Whereas when it comes to augmenting human capabilities, particularly in educational research, where the ultimate goal is to improve educational outcomes rather than improving the state of the field in AI, human AI systems may be and should be considered as the optimum state rather than as a transitioning state to full automation. And within this paradigm, it begs the question of what augmentation is essentially needed and what augmentation should be provided to humans within educational settings. And I think there are at least 3 different conceptualizations of AI, and each might bring in value to the teaching and learning in different contexts. In such human AI systems, I think AI can be used to externalize, internalize, and extend human cognition. In the externalization of cognition paradigm, certain human tasks are well-defined, modeled, and replaced by AI as exemplified in some of the intelligent tutoring systems, as also covered by my colleague, Professor Mike. On the other hand, in the internalization of the model's conceptualization, AI can be used to help humans change their operations and representation of thoughts. For instance, in most of the learning analytics implementations, most of those what we call as rule-based or good old-fashioned AI techniques are used for such internalizations of models due to their transparent and explainable nature presented to humans through certain interfaces. And at last, AI models can also be used to extend human cognition as part of tightly coupled human and artificial systems. It is important to highlight here that in such systems, the whole is expected to be more than the sum of each agent's intelligence, and usually a change in both agents are observed through their dynamic interactions. Based on this conceptualization, I want to continue in this introductory talk with 3 key lessons that we have learned from existing AI in education research that might help us potentially pave the way forward on those tightly coupled human AI systems that are not necessarily like human, and I don't really think that they should be judged with human intelligence or compared to human intelligence, but they are human-centric, that are designed to align with the values of humans. First, as most of the human learning concepts we are interested in are extremely complex, there is a great need to bring in data that is multimodal and develop and design robust techniques to deal with the complex data sources, including potential biases and fairness issues that might be embedded into these complex data sources. Second, the research from the learning sciences that has helped us understand a great deal about how humans learn should be used as the guide and the guidance for better modeling of this data to inform the development of AI techniques for use in education. And third, human factors that are related to the AI tools, including student and teachers' preferences, why and how the tools will be used, the social contexts in which these tools will be used, as well as their ethical and societal implications related to fairness, accountability, and transparency should all be carefully considered before their development and implementation in real-world settings. A good understanding of such human factors is key for AI's successful adoption and wise use in educational settings. To exemplify these 3 points, let me give you a few recent research projects that I have been working on with regards to these 3 key messages and perhaps exemplify them a little bit more in depth. With regards to the value of multimodal data, for instance, in this example, we have recently built a multimodal data collection system for the support and evaluation of learners' collaboration and collaborative problem-solving competence. This is well aligned with the expected innovation that might potentially be brought forward with AI technologies, rather than trying to automate the bad practices, bad pedagogies that are not working effectively in today's practice. So the system that we built was collecting data through 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional video for gesture analysis. Students were wearing fiducial marks on their hands to track their speed and distance between their hands. They were using physical computing kits through which they were designing a solution to a complex problem, and we were collecting all their interactions with the coding interface. And also students had their mobile tools, recording their reflections and notes on their experience of the design process. And using this input data, we trained models to predict the collaborative problem-solving competence as well as groups' project outcomes. There is not much time within this context of this meeting to get into the technical details, but these are the F1 scores for traditional machine learning approaches, and similarly, deep learning approaches that are achieving promising values. And these scores that you can see are the mean squared error rates of the predictions of the AI model that we have built. And in order to be able to see the value of multimodal data, we started training models with removed data modalities. And we have exemplified that when we are taking different modalities out of the model itself, the accuracy dropped significantly, which shows the value of different modalities of data in interpreting complex learning processes like collaboration. In another example, in order to automatically detect students' engagement states in group work, we built a computer vision system that can predict students' active, semi-active, and passive states engagement from 2-dimensional video data. We initially applied libraries like OpenPose for gesture and skeleton data generation. We built a Bayesian model to identify each student and train a team LSTM neural network to detect students' active, semi-active, and passive states automatically. Now, the classification results were particularly good in terms of detecting students who are passive and students who are active, which are valuable informations for a teacher to act upon, considering the limited amount of time that they might have for each group. In another work, using similar techniques to those used in autopilot systems of cars and airplanes, we built a model to detect students' wakefulness states while they are engaging with e-learning platforms. So to model students' wakefulness, we use multimodal data from their heart rate, seat pressure, and gestures. As you can see, the heart rate data values were mainly used to detect stress and rest states. Seat pressure data was to detect students' postures and body positions, and 2-dimensional video data was used to detect students' number of blinks and head rotations. The core point here is to make the connections of the constructs that we are interested in and measuring to the existing available scientific research that shows the value of these proxies for learning. For instance, the number of blinks and its association with the cognitive engagement is an established scientific research query that we can build upon and use AI's abilities to help us predict and detect those valuable constructs for learning. The second lesson I mentioned briefly was the fact that data might be plenty in this day and age, but unless the models that shape them are closely connected to the theories we have developed in learning sciences research, they might have little value for teaching and learning. Therefore, we need to drive our models, our AI designs, with our current understanding, up-to-date understanding of how human learning occurs. For instance, in our recent research, we have been trying to utilize complex learning processes, like in this example, we tried to operationalize collaborative cognitive load theory to be able to structure the data that is coming from the contexts of online group discussions. There is plenty of data from students' online interactions, but unless we have a clear definition of what collaboration is, a clear definition of what kind of proxies might represent collaboration and use our current understanding of learning sciences, this data might have little value to model and interpret complex learning processes, therefore would have little value for students and teachers. I will not get into the details within this talk, but here we were essentially trying to model the balancing act between students' interactivity gains and coordination costs, which are the two key constructs that have been argued to be valuable to interpret collaboration in collaborative cognitive law theory. And then we have been designing visualizations of the difference between these interactivity gains and coordination costs that might help teachers and students to better understand where and when collaboration occurs effectively, and when it doesn't occur, how they can intervene to improve students' ability to collaborate. And at last, in addition to the multimodal data, which requires strong technical robustness to be processed, and the learning sciences theories to drive the conceptual structure of data that has been collected, human factors such as student and teachers' values, their preferences, their social contexts and needs, requirements, as well as their expected ethical considerations should all be taken into account at all stages of the AI in education, design, and use. Taking these questions once the tools are designed and they are in practice is a too late stage to consider ethical concerns and ethical considerations. AI implications have the power to be scaled, but that also means that any mistake that is led by AI implementations would create a scaled harm. And we need to think very carefully before we start implementing these kind of AI technologies in real-world practice. Again, to exemplify my point, I want to give a research tool example from my own work. So in the context of remote meetings, similar to the one that we are having at the moment, last year, due to COVID, we had moved entire teaching to online, and we were sending AI bots in students' group meetings, trying to investigate students' speech behaviors.
2 minutes, Dr. Maslow, please.
And each Zoom meeting students were having as a group, an AI bot was generating visualizations of how much each student was talking, as well as the mutuality of their discussions. And based on this data, it was generating an automated feedback form that was sent as an email to students. These are the aspects of your collaboration that you can improve in your next meeting. Although the system was highly appreciated by educators, the further design investigations revealed significant issues and concerns from students with regards to their potential privacy and surveillance issues. For instance, students were expecting the content of their discussion to be analyzed for judging how much learning relevant discussion was taking place, but the same students were also arguing that if the content analysis was made on their discussions, they would never give their consent, ethical consent, for these kind of tools to be used in practice. So the last point, which brings me this whole conversation to a potential key message that I want to give as part of
1 minute, please, is
that when we make, if we want to make human AI systems a reality, we need a lot more strong inter-stakeholder collaborations. Traditionally, tech developers, academics, educators, as well as policymakers operated in silos in educational technologies ecosystems. However, such artifacts that we are creating are not neutral objects. They are actively co-shaping our beings in the world and shape our perceptions, our actions, as well as our thinking. In order to be able to create this value alignment, we need stronger connections between the key stakeholders of educational ecosystem to be engaged in the design and use of AI technologies.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Matlu, for this constructive lecture or presentation. شكرا جزيلا. تحدث الدكتور ماتلو عن تضمين الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم وتصميم الذكاء الاصطناعي للتصدي للتحديات التعليم من منظور الأبعاد المترابطة، والذي تبدأ بتوظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي ثم التركيز على الذكاء الإنساني ثم تعليم الناس لاستخدام نماذج الذكاء الاصطناعي بأمن وفاعلية. انتقل الدكتور ماترو بعد ذلك للحديث عن دور الذكاء الاصطناعي في توسيع الإدراك المعرفي البشري داخليا وخارجيا ونتائج البحث عن حركة الطلاب أثناء التعلم. ثم أخذنا إلى رؤية مستقبلية للذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم بين تحكم الإنسان وتحكم الذكاء الاصطناعي مع التركيز على الأخلاقيات والعوامل الإنسانية. ثم الختام الذهبي كان بالمثلث الذهبي، والذي يقترح لنجاح توظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم باجتماع كافة الأطراف على طاولة واحدة: الفني المطور والباحث الأكاديمي والمعلم والمتعلم. الحقيقة دور هذه الندوة أو السيمينار هو قد يكون إثارة الأسئلة أكثر من الإجابات، فبالتالي أظن أننا نحتاج إلى لقاء آخر موسع للإجابة على عدد من الأسئلة التي طرحت. And I'm afraid that we are running of time now. أنا سأترك يعني جزء من الأسئلة. هل سيكتفي التعليم؟ هذه الأسئلة تكون للجميع للبحث عنها حتى نعقد لقاء آخر مستقبليا إن شاء الله. هل سيكتفي التعليم بتوظيف جزئي لمستحدثات الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم، أم سيتجه للتوظيف الكلي؟ هل سيتم الدمج بين ذكاء الآلة وذكاء الإنسان في التعليم؟ بمعنى هل سيأتي يوما نرى المعلم الآلي يقف في فصولنا ومدارسنا؟ متى ذلك اليوم؟ هل هو قريب؟ هل سيتوقف دور الذكاء الاصطناعي بالعمل كمساعد المعلم، أم سيبعد المعلم خارج النظام التعليمي؟ أين حدود الأخلاقيات؟ أين حدود العواطف، المشاعر، العدالة، الشفافية إلى آخره؟ ما تأثير الذكاء الاصطناعي على تنمية مهارات حل المشكلات والتفكير الناقد ومهارات الحياة لدى المتعلمين والتي ينادي بها التربويون؟ أيضا هل يستطيع الذكاء الاصطناعي لوحده القيام بعملية التعليم والتعلم؟ ما هو الضمان لنجاح توظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم؟ ثم ما هو الدور المناسب للذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم؟ وهل الذكاء الاصطناعي هو الحل لمشكلات التعليم؟ كيف يمكن التعامل مع الأبعاد الاجتماعية والثقافية؟ هل نحن بحاجة إلى كل هذا الذكاء الاصطناعي، أم نحن بحاجة إلى ما يكفي مثل ما ذكر الدكتور ماتلو فقط لنحسن نواتج التعلم والاستغناء عما سوى ذلك؟ هذه أسئلة أتركها للجميع، وقد بإذن الله تعالى نبحث عن إجابات لها في القريب العاجل، كل منها يستحق بحث. في الختام نشكر المحاضرين على عرضهم الرائع، نشكر أصحاب المعالي الذين صبروا معنا واستمروا معنا رغم مشاغلهم الجسيمة إدراكا منهم لأهمية هذا الموضوع. نشكر المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي، نشكر مكتب التربية العربي لدول الخليج على حسن اختيار موضوع الندوة وحسن اختيار المحاضرين. ثم الشكر الخاص لكم أيها السيدات والسادة الحاضرون لحسن استماعكم وإثرائكم لهذه الندوة، فقد وصل العدد حوالي 1000، والتي أتمنى أن نكون قد وفقنا فيها إلى الإجابة على بعض التساؤلات أو طرح بعض التساؤلات الحيوية الهامة، وأثرنا بعض الأفكار والأسئلة التي تبحث عن إجابة. شكرا لكم وإلى لقاء قريب. وأترك الآن المايك للزميلة سحر الأسد لتدير الجلسة الثانية مع تمنياتي الخالصة لها ولكم بالتوفيق والسداد، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا جزيلا زميلي الدكتور عبد الله. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So now as we move to the second session, I have to say it was very informative to learn about all the AI technical implications of education from Class A scientists. But now we're going to move into the practical side of AI into the schools. And we're going to have examples from, one, the Ministry of Education here in the UAE, And secondly, from two powerhouse platforms that have exhibited strong presence in the region, and they are Alif Education and Century Tech. But before we start with examples, we're going to start the session with Dr. Fan-Chin Mao, who will exhibit through his presentation how are these technical side of AI and the practical side of AI are connected together through policy making. So without further ado, let me just introduce him to you. Dr. Mao is the chief of the unit for ICT in education at UNESCO Education Sector, headquarters in Paris. He's leading UNESCO education sector programs in areas of ICT in education policy planning and development, AI and education, digital skills development for teachers and students, open educational resources, mobile learning, and future e-schools. He's also in charge of the UNESCO Prize for the use of ICT in education. And under this competence, he is coordinating the cooperation with other UN agencies in the field of ICT for SDGs. Before joining UNESCO, Dr. Mao was the Director General of the National Research Center for Computer Education in the Ministry of Education in China. And in that capacity, he was responsible for the development of ICT in education policy and ICT curriculum standards for students and managing the National Association for the Use of ICT in K-12 schools of China. Please, Dr. Mao.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Your Excellency Minister of Education, dear Director of the Regional Center for Education Planning, distinguished speakers, many of you are my friends, nice to see you here. And dear participants, it's really my honor to have this opportunity to share what UNESCO is doing and what we are thinking of the use of artificial intelligence in education with you. I was given the theme on the use of AI for education system. I have talk about this topic, and different from the previous presentation and speeches, this one will be very much at the macro level. I hope it's useful. I fully agree with the moderator of the formal session that it's more important to ask a question than answering the questions. So my presentation will very much focus on asking questions. So first of all, how can AI help address the fundamental challenge, especially the existing challenge we are facing from the education systems? And secondly, what will be the AI-enabled futures of the education system if we look forward to 5 years, 10 years, 2 decades later? And I will briefly, if possible, if I have time, to introduce you to what UNESCO is doing in the field of AI and education. And let's quickly cap what we are facing in terms of challenge. We have the persistent exclusion from school education, especially for the poorer children. So far, we still have almost 260 million students. School-age students are out of school. They are not students, they are just children. And we have the inequitable literacy rate. We have the gender disparity. We have the shortage of qualified teacher. And we have the marginalized groups that are, suffering the disruption in terms of accessing and also the quality of learning. And we need to ensure SDG 4. We all know the vision of SDG 4, and we have a disparity that could be described in terms of female to female, rural to urban, bottom income to top income, and the people with disability, people living in the indigenous community, and also we are facing more and more conflict-affected, kind of regions and peoples. With this, we are facing a lot of statistics. We are not lack of data. For example, in terms of the gross enrollment to the school education, here is the data. You can see for the low income, they are less than 60%. In the high income, it's almost 100%. The macro level question is that how can we, or whether we can use AI to analyze the root cause behind this, and can we mine further cross-platform data to inform the policymakers with better data, with better analysis? I think it's quite different from the previous discussion on the use of AI in pedagogical activity. And this is the literacy rate. It's the same, but there's an interesting curve. It's not that the richer the people are, the higher literacy rate they will be. We realize that in European countries, in United States, in the wealthiest groups, their literacy rate is not 100%. Why? what are the root causes, and how we can mine cross-platform from social media further data to help us analyze them and make a policy decision. And gender disparity, I don't need to read all the information. For example, the women and girls are 4 times less likely to know how to do coding and programming. And more importantly, less women are entering IT industry, but 13 times less likely to file technology patents, which means they are reluctant for certain reason to do technological innovation. Why? And is the AI, is the algorithm helping us address the gender discrimination or add to the existing one? We already experienced that, we need to attend to that continuously. And how AI can enable the futures of education system, because education system is very complex. When I receive this assignment, I need to understand what the organizer mean about education systems. And we need to see that there's a lot of existing functions in the education system. We need to consider how AI can enhance them. At the same time, how we can make use of AI to make education more inclusive. And we also need to think a fundamental question: what sort of future this system we want to create, and what sort of AI can help us to enable them. And so in the book we published, especially I and Wen co-authored, we published in April of this year. We try to summarize the AI techniques and AI technology. It's not easy, but we try to do that. And I think Wen, I believe, had somehow presented these kind of concepts in his presentation. I don't want to repeat. We are having more and more and wider range of AI technologies in our hand, especially in a country like UAE. I think we have discussed this a lot. The question is that what are the needs? What could be the use cases? And more importantly, what the AI solutions so far are mainly focusing on? We all know that there's a word, AI so far can help us, or can even the AI can only replace the low-skill task units of human. We are not saying that we are using AI to replace human, but AI can replace the low-skill task unit. In education sector is the same. So far, the AI solutions to education are mainly targeting the replacement or supporting of low-skill task unit, especially under the education system. We can analyze them, for example, to address the barriers to inclusive access, especially for the persons with a different disability. And the low-skill teaching is just the tutoring, transmission of knowledge. AI can do it, but for the innovative pedagogy, so far we have never found a good AI solution that could enable innovative pedagogy. And so far we call it to use AI to recognize learning patterns and to support personalized learning. Is somehow aligned because it's only to facilitate the knowledge mapping, and we can call it the content profiling. It's really based on the fact-based teaching, fact-based lecture. And in terms of addressing the in-depth learning problem, we have not found so many good AI solutions. And it's the same, for the use of AI for assessment. So far, the use of AI is mainly to facilitate the low-skill grading, low-skill processing, low-skill data collection. And if we are talking about the use of AI to monitor the formative learning outcome and to predict and alert education dropout, so far we have not found a very, very good solution either. And at the same time, for education management, especially the administrative management, so far, of course, AI can help us to support low-skill admin tasks. But in terms of very complex data-informed EMIS, we still cannot find the examples. We need to use this very simple taxonomy to analyze. But since I'm asking to talk about how to use AI to facilitate education system, let me share some concrete examples, because this session is supposed to share example. We from UNESCO, we have collected a lot of conducted case studies. We also have the prize for ICT education. Every year we elicit more than 100 nominations and submissions all of them are the self-claim that they are AI in education solution or AI in education projects. So here we can draw some clues. For example, we all know that AI can help us to facilitate learning of students with a disability. One example is Huawei's Story Sun. Why I put this one as an example? Because it's free. It's totally open source. They offer pre-access. And more importantly, the story sign is not as simple as we imagine, because there's dialects in the story sign. For example, in Arabic language, the story sign for Arabic language in UAE is different from the story, the sign language in Qatar, or different from the sign language in Arabic. This application try to, provide support for any kind of sign language. And for example, for the people with visual disability, I would like to propose our own project. We are cooperating with the NORAD, with Norway, in promoting global digital library. We are not using our AI application. We use Google Voice Assistant, and the children with visual disability can ask the application to read a book. And of course, this one is a commercial application, but it's powerful to help people with visual disability, even beyond the people with the visual disability, to help people to read news, check facts, tell jokes, and even tell them the timing, and even to help with the medical appointment. So that's this one. And for autism, there's also some tools that move beyond access to learning and to a kind of a personalized treatment of disability. So I list some example here. If you are interested, you can click the link to check out. And we also, through a kind of call for innovation, we found some learning management system that are developed by the developing country and that are serving the developing country. For example, one of the best example is this one, M-Schule. M meaning mobile school. Schule meaning is the short name of Swahili of Kenya. And it's developed by Kenya and is used mainly for African country. And so that's also these kind of things. And then we also have some tools to help students with the reading disability, especially with the dyslexia. And one of the winners of UNESCO Prize for ICT Education in 2019 was from Spain. They have AI-powered tools to diagnose dyslexia very easily in the early age. And if they find the student with this problem, they can start the treatment as early as possible to avoid, to miss the critical period. And also we have other tools to help parents and teachers to diagnose the reading levels, literacy levels for students with dyslexia or reading difficulties. And of course, there's also other projects and tools. For example, writing robots. It's not that the robotics to teach students. They ask a student to teach the robotics and challenge the student, especially those students with writing difficulty, and to help them. And at the same time, we also have another prize-winning project from UNESCO's Prize for ICT Education is from Finland. It's the winning of 2020 edition of UNESCO's prize. It's from the University of Turku. They have the learning analytics platform to cover 4 functions. First of all, they are helping the student and teachers to achieve curricular objectives by subject levels, by subject areas and grade levels. And they also can analyze student study habits and to predict learning outcome, and also to diagnose learning problems. Of course, they can predict the course grades to have early alert. And it's not only to tell students, you will be like this, you will be that, but it's more like to propose some recommendations. And of course, they have the automating learning analytics. They can help the other people to have the learning analytics service. Of course, they are addressing the efficacy issue. And we have, I think, almost in addition to myself, almost the other speakers are from the UK. We also have the Open University analysts try to predict the learning problem. And another one is, how the AI are being used for the low skill education management, especially for the chatbot. We have one example from Australia University, from Tutoring University, and another prize-winning project is from China this year. They have a one college student per village program. They're using chatbot in supporting the distance learning program. It's the real photo. And we move from the low skill to high order tasks, so we can find the data-informed psychometric profiling, but it's also risky. They are trying to predict and create a kind of a psychometric profile of a student, but we should be careful. We should not predetermine the student future, but there's these kind of efforts. And at the same time, for the lifelong learning outcomes, some government already started the use of blockchain to recognize and record learning outcomes, especially lifelong learning outcome, especially from Singapore. They probably is the #1 countries, the first countries in doing so. And I want to highlight that high tech is not the panacea for the challenge in education system. We need to believe, and we need to keep this belief that the high touch between human and by human is more important. And so for this purpose, we will not spare any efforts to advocate that the legislations, top level policies should be developed to ensure that we can protect the data privacy and we can prevent the algorithm discrimination against any marginalized group, not only the student with a disability, but also even the cultural minor groups. And we need to regulate intrusive AI-powered tools, for example, the headring. To my opinion, we should not install, we should not test it, we should not ask a student to wear this in the classroom. And even the US companies promoting it. And in our book, we're also promoting the human agency, the teacher agency, student agency, especially in the teaching and the learning activity. We should not forget the agency for human, and we should inspire humans' intelligence instead of enfeeble humans' mind when we are using AI. So this should be always keeping the core of using AI. And I want to propose further questions and some observations. Digitalization is not only about digital transmission of traditional knowledge. It's more about the digitalization of knowledge production, and the production and sharing of digitalized knowledge is not the traditional knowledge. It's about digitalized knowledge, digital behavior, digitalized life, and digitalized public service. And in the long run, it's about digital human being, or what we are being. And we are talking from UNESCO, we are talking a keyword called digital humanism. And even we need to pay attention to the digitalization of human society. And we need to observe the historical evolution of the technology and what's the turning point we are facing. And what's the next generation of transformative technology? If we can combine AI, 5G, Internet of Things, and the AI, the very, very advanced AI, especially the metaverse, in the long run, what will happen? What's the implications for learning and for education system? We must consider, we must prepare for that. And once again, we need to highlight that we are observing a lot of transformed technology, but the education system will not be transformed until this transformed technology become public good or common good that are available for everybody. Just like the lamp, the light is become available for everybody. It transforms our life. Until we reach that point, we cannot see this is a transformed technology. All education system is transformed. And we need to think how we can integrate AI solutions together. It's not AI to do this, AI to do that in the chicken piece. We need to think how we can integrate the AI and to enhance the intersectoral streamlining of the education planning, allocation of resources, and how to improve the public service for teachers, for students, for parents. And if you ask me about the country example, I only find one is from China. They develop a strategy they call neural infrastructure for education. And we need to pay attention to this is the trend. And before I conclude, I want to summarize also, we need to pay attention to the global governance. We have the international governmental agency like UN, and we are promoting common good. And we also have the state public governance. For example, you have a government, you are pushing the public good in your country, and you highlight the sovereignty of your country. We see the rise up of the sovereignty from states like UK, United States, Australia sign a pact and try to push your interest. We push that. We find that this kind of state level sovereignty is pushing back the international organization, UN agencies is pushing back. And at the same time, the digital private governance is pushing the individual's human right, is pushing state governance. We are all pushed to the corner by the digital private governance. We need to acknowledge that. Many people are not aware of that. With every day we are governed by the digital platform, but we are not cautious about that. So based on this, we opened a survey. We opened 2 surveys actually, try to find out what's behind the use of AI in education. So we need to think what behind that. If we believe that data is a new property, like the lands, like our apartment, our old law is to protect our private property. The law need to reform to protect the new property. Where's the law? We don't have found it yet. We have not found it yet. And if we talk AI tools, where are the data from? Who owned it? And how to use the AI, the data? And then we need to discover who are the developers of the AI tools, who are the manager of the use of AI in different sectors, and who are the users. What's the relationship? What are the partners? Are we regulated to the partners? And what is the total cost of ownership of using AI tools in education system? It's easy to see, it's difficult to buy. If the government are going to validate and purchase AI service for education system, we need to calculate what kind of inventory of technology do we have, and what are the incremental technology, what are the costs, and what kind of deployment solution. Cloud-based, why we should use cloud-based if we are talking about the political sensitive data? And are we using the on-premise solution? Are we using the offline application, or are we using combination of these 3? And if the users are using them, what about their human rights? What about their human dignity? And when we using the AI tools, are we requiring teachers for additional labors, or are we releasing their low skill labors? And how about the human agency? We need to consider this. And with this, I want to move to the next one. We have been doing a lot from UNESCO. We are supporting the ICT education policy with a specific focus on OER and AI. For example, the AI in education, we have adopted the Beijing Consensus in 2019. It's available in Arabic as well. And we published this guidance in April, where I said multiple times. And now English and Chinese version are available. Arabic version is available, should be released in 1 month. And we have several reports about the case studies, country examples, and bottom-up examples. If you are interested, you can look
Sorry,
into...
Dr. Ma, but 2 more minutes?
Yes, 1 minute probably. And it is the big picture about what we are doing. Based on the book, AI and Education Guidance for Policymakers, we will go on to work with the member states, including the Regional Center on Education Planning, to foster AI-ready policymakers. And we are launching a project in Thursday this week. With this project, we will cover 3 strands of work. First of all, based on UNESCO's recommendation on ethics of AI, it's general ethics of AI that will be adopted in November. We will go on to develop an ethical principle specifically on use of AI in education. And we are now developing a guiding framework on AI competencies. We have finished the 2 surveys on the AI curriculum for school education from government perspective and also from non-government perspective. And we are also preparing, and we will organize international experts to have a series of expert meetings to talk about AI-enabled future. We will have a report on AI and the futures of learning, and probably include the scenarios introduced by Mutlu and other speakers in the earlier session. And if possible, we will also try to curate open algorithm and open AI tools and put them as a public good. So that's all from me. I hope it's not too much. I hope it's not too micro. And I sincerely hope that it's useful. And UNESCO stands ready to cooperate with all of you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mao. Power dynamic of the global governance is something I will definitely look into. And the digital humanism is a term I'm gonna further study. Thank you so much. So now we're gonna move into the experienced example from the Ministry of Education. فمع الزميلة فاطمة عدلي من وزارة التربية والتعليم لاستعراض تجربة دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة في استثمار الذكاء الاصطناعي لتطوير المنظومة التعليمية. فاطمة عدلي إخصائية مناهج بوزارة التربية والتعليم بدبي، حصلت على البكالوريوس في هندسة الاتصالات وماجستير في الهندسة الكهربائية وهندسة الحاسبات من جامعة خليفة. فاطمة تعمل حالياً على تطوير مناهج التكنولوجيا في إدارة المواد العلمية. تفضلي أختي فاطمة.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm very honored to be part of this seminar. Please let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
But if you can, yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. So today I'll be presenting how the technology subject in the Ministry of Education integrate AI into its curricula. So let me start with the vision and mission of the K-12 technology subject. So our vision is to enrich the character of the Emirati school as graduate students with creativity, design, innovative thinking, in order to equip our students with the required tools and skills in order to be able to solve real-world problems. Our mission is to create a first-rate educational experience promoting project-based learning in fields of design, engineering, visual communication, sustainability, and computer science through an entrepreneurial outlook that would help our students be prepared for higher education and beyond. So the vision and mission of the K-12 subject are closely linked to UAE's strategies and initiatives, including the fourth industrial revolution, having a stream vision for our education where our students build interdisciplinary connections between the different subjects they study, developing our students the skills, including computational thinking, collaboration, critical thinking, and problem solving, as well as building a generation of students that are able to develop creative solutions to solve today's problems and are able to link the skills and knowledge they acquire to the market. So the Ministry of Education envisions an educational structure where students are not only technology users, but they're also technology creators. To achieve this vision, the technology subject curricula identifies 14 components clustered into 5 domains to convey core ideas and practices which technology education from K to 12 should be taught. These 5 domains are computer science, engineering principles and systems, visual communication, design and innovation, and sustainability. Now, one might wonder, how do we integrate these 5 domains into one subject? Well, the answer is simple. We only need to reflect upon real-life scenarios. In order to solve any problem, we need to apply knowledge and skills from different disciplines. Let's take creating a smartwatch, for example. In order to build this product, students would have to incorporate computer science knowledge in order to have this watch linked to the internet, to have IoT connectivity, to have features such as to have features such as alerting the users that they might have, for example, a viral illness because their body temperature was changed. They also need to incorporate engineering principles and systems in order to build the internal circuitry of this device, to use different types of sensors to collect data and monitor the user's parameters. They need design and innovation in order to design the product itself, to have a unique design different than the ones available in the market. They need sustainability, for example, to use sustainable energy sources to power the watch, or even to use sustainable materials for the watch band. And finally, they need visual communication in order to use smart materials for manufacturing, for testing, for prototyping before sending the product for mass production. And that's exactly how we teach our students the subject. We teach them the different disciplines, and then we teach them the link between the different disciplines. And this way, our students would have a profound understanding of the connections between the different subjects they study. So diving more into the curriculum structure, the K-12 curriculum is divided into 3 cycles. Cycle 1 goes from K to 4, Cycle 2 goes from grade 5 to 8, and Cycle 3 goes from grades 9 to 12. Diving more into the computer science domain, which incorporates, of course, artificial intelligence. We start by building the foundation in Cycle 1 for students. In Cycle 1, students develop their knowledge and conceptual understanding of what computer science is. They learn the basics of programming, of algorithmic thinking, and they get a very basic introduction to internet, cyber safety, and artificial intelligence. As they move to Cycle 2, they focus more on the 5 components of the computer science domain, including computing systems, in network and the internet, data analysis, algorithms and programming, and impacts of computing. This way, students will build an understanding between the difference between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. They will also learn how to use abstraction, decomposition when tackling large tasks and discovering solutions to complex problems. As they move to Cycle 3, they start by implementing and employing sophisticated algorithms in order to solve real-world problems. They will design innovative and unique projects to solve real-life problems using different manufacturing and computer programming techniques. Giving you an example of how this is articulated across the 3 cycles. Let's take AI, for example. In order to teach our students artificial intelligence eventually, we start by teaching them the very basics. In Cycle 1, grades K to 12, we teach them the basics of programming using coding cards. But we also identify and teach them the 5 big ideas of AI. More on that later. In Cycle 2, our students start developing simple programming codes using block-based programming, and eventually, as they graduate grade 8, they would have used also text-based programming. They also learn more about AI systems and start assessing the trade-offs in AI designs. They learn the impact of the decisions they make. In Cycle 3, they start writing algorithms using text-based programming, and they learn more about the AI, its branches, how and where they can apply it. In Cycle 3, they start writing sophisticated code in order to solve and develop solutions for complex problems. Now, the Ministry of Education, in order to achieve this vision, it ensures an equal distribution of educational resources so that every student would have the opportunity to participate in all aspects of the educational process and be able to achieve the overall aim of the educational experience. Now, focusing more on the integration of AI in the curriculum, we start by UAE's vision for using the AI. So the vision is to use AI as a tool to enhance all other fields, including being the world's lead in the field of AI, to use it to find solutions and overcome challenges and to boost the performance. But it also focuses on education, because our aim is to build a UAE youth that has all the required skills for the current and future time. So how does the MOE follow this? The MOE follows this approach by the implementation of AI in classroom in 3 approaches: learning AI, learning for AI, and learning with AI. In learning AI, it's simply the application of tools and technologies of AI. In learning for AI, that's what we do in the curriculum. That's us teaching our students the required skills that they need in life and in the workforce today for the AI world that we live in. We teach them how to develop their computational thinking skills, problem-solving skills, as well as coding and data literacy. In learning with AI, it's integrating AI technologies into the classroom. For example, creating ebooks with embedded media, interactive content, and code editors, such as the one shown here. Some of the solutions that AI can bring to education, while some people might disagree, is having a personalized learning, where an AI system can assess the students' weaknesses and strengths and then suggest programs for them to take in order to improve their performance. We have automated correcting algorithms that would help teachers in grading assignments. We have virtual classroom assistants, and we have plagiarism detectors that would help teachers in, again, assigning students assignments. Now, implementing AI in the curriculum happens in stages. So we start from an early age into elementary AI stage, intermediate, and then our students would graduate with the ability to apply AI in different applications. Going to this into more details, in the early stage of AI, our students learn basic skills of programming. They start by building simple algorithms and practice Python programming. As they progress, they start by a better introduction to artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, the applications of AI, how to use and collect data, and how to evaluate the models that they have built. As they progress, they start learning more about the classical machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms, including single and multi-layer perceptrons and deep learning and computer vision systems. They start using applications that employ such algorithms and understand how these systems work. Finally, when they reach the final stage of AI, our students would have the required skills that they need in order to build an AI application themselves. So they will employ the knowledge that they have acquired across the different stages in order to build an AI application in different fields. That could be, for example, robotics, Internet of Things, or security. In order to build that knowledge and in order to teach our students artificial intelligence in the curriculum, we rely on the 5 big ideas. The 5 big ideas include perception, representation and reasoning, learning, natural interaction, and societal impact. In perception, we teach our students how computers understand the world, how they use sensors in order to collect information and understand their surroundings. In representation and reasoning, we teach our students that computers construct representations using data structures and that these representations support reasoning to draw and drive new information from what they already know, while keeping in mind that humans and computers think in a different ways. Learning that computers can simply learn from data, natural interactions that we need to teach computers how to interact like humans, which means they need to converse as humans, be able to recognize and read facial expressions and emotion, and to understand cultural differences. In societal impact, they need to learn that this technology has a positive and negative impact. Now,
2 minutes, Fatma. Thank you.
Okay, so this is just how we teach it in levels. So we don't introduce it at once. We introduce each idea in levels. So we're starting with the basic and then we evolve. Let me skip this, go into the resources. In order to implement AI in the curriculum correctly, we need to use the right resources. Currently, we're using the Oryx car, which is an autonomous car that can help students learn how artificial intelligence can be implemented in real-life applications. We're also investigating the use of Google Vision Kit, Google Voice Kit, and Google AI experiments. This is just simply showing you what is the Oryx car. It has a virtual environment where students teach the car on a track and then use this information to drive itself completely 100% autonomously without any external control. This is the actual environment. Again, this is another example of how our students build the project from scratch, similar to the Oryx car, but this is built from scratch. They build the model, they build the circuit, and they program it. We're also incorporating the use of AI in different domains. This is using AI in the visual communication domain. These are a list of other projects that we have in the curriculum. Our curriculum was mapped across using several national and international frameworks, including PTEC, UK, and AAAI. And we have the support of many external stakeholders, naming few: Khalifa University, Microsoft, Autodesk, and Code.org. And in order to encourage our students to be more active participants, we encourage them to participate in national and international competitions. That's it from my side. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found it useful.
It was very useful indeed and very, very informative. Thank you very much, Fatma. For the interest of time, we're going to end the seminar at 4 p.m. So can I ask my next 2 presenters to please keep it 10 minutes max? And we're going to cancel the Q&A for this session too. But first, let me introduce my next presenter, Joe Sabali, who's the Chief Product Officer of Alif Education. Alif Education has become the most widely used AI platform here in the UAE. It's reached 196 public schools this academic year. Joe Sabali has over 15 years of experience working with technology and ed tech firms with an emphasis on digital transformation. Prior to Alif, he led education services initiatives at Pearson and McGraw Hill across higher education, K-12, and vocational markets. He focused mainly on leveraging global expertise and capabilities to develop innovative products. Joe is currently leading the product team in Alif Education, as I said, with the focus on crystallizing the vision of the product and creating value propositions of end users. Joe holds a bachelor and master's degree in computer science from the American University of Beirut and a master in business administration from London Business School. The floor is yours, Joe.
Thank you, Sahar. It's an honor and privilege for me to be here. I'll try to keep it as short as possible, but at least give you some of the key ideas or insight which I'll try to articulate. So the title of my paper is AI Application and Implication in the Realm of K-12. And to take it a bit further, we are talking about the application here in the UAE, especially in the public schools. For those who don't know, Alif is used between grade 5 to grade 12 across all the public schools here. So it's around 320 schools. We have around 150,000 students and 8,300 teachers that are using the platform. What is interesting about Alif, and I think this is something unique in terms of offering, is that we try to cater for everyone in the education ecosystem. So we have a portal for students, for teachers, for principals, for guardian, even for school inspectors, to be able to see what's happening in the underlying system. And this allows us to capture quite a lot of information on the student, on the teachers, on the different behavior, and to use this information to further improve both the product and also hopefully the educational outcomes. In terms of key AI application, and this maybe has been tackled a bit in the previous presentation, but there are two big umbrellas when it comes to AI, and in Alif we try to do both of them in parallel. There is AI when it comes to instructions. So how do you personalize learning? And personalization here is a spectrum. So personalization could be, as highlighted in one of the presentation, in terms of self-actualization, like this is the ultimate goal. But there are different levels of personalization when it comes to creating different pathways, suggesting the content at the right place, the right time. So all of these things are tackled as part of Alif Education. And the other thing which we're trying to do is to support students with different needs. So I will also highlight this a bit further down my presentation. But on a higher level, we're trying to do some AI applications on a system level. So what we're trying to do is to build some predictive model and assess skill and measure the growth of the student throughout time. Here in the second application, we're more looking at data at the macro level and trying to understand the different trends and how the students are using and how the teachers are interacting with the system to build these specific models. When it comes to why this type of approach is important and is critical, we have to look at the policy making, at least the process when it comes to policy making and what it entails. Education is a bit like a black box. And this is something worldwide known, where there is a lot of investment that goes into education, but it's very difficult to measure the outcome, partly because the outcome will come in at a later stage. And later stage means several years down the line. So take, for example, 2017, if you were to actually measure outcomes 5 years down the line, while COVID happened, students are studying from home. There is a big discussion on learning loss. All of these things are part of the discussion. So the variable have changed. So having AI and having data will help us to drive insights and to be able to respond very quickly to the changes in the dynamic environment. Now back to a typical classroom. It's not very typical because the classroom is pretty small, but I couldn't fit enough students on one screen. But typically we have students with different requirements. Some of them are more on the creative side. The other one are interested upon different things. And at the center of it, you always have the teacher who is under pressure when it comes to their timetable, their requirement. There is quite a lot of things that the teacher need to do. And often they don't have time to give that personalization for individual student. So the promise of AI, and these are some of the 2 tracks which we are working on, is how do we help teacher focus on these critical aspects that require the human intervention element. And things around knowledge transfer are things that can be handled by a machine or an AI system. But also, how can we further personalize learning and provide the right set of recommendation at the right place for students while they are learning, so that they don't feel they're being continuously assessed by a system. And the reason why AI, and in particular, a lot of initiative work in that context, is machines are very good in terms of analyzing networks, whereas human beings would look at them, especially when there are thousands of nodes. It's very difficult to see where you are at, what are some of the missing skills, missing prerequisites. So one of the big things which we're working on is how do we integrate the different subjects together. So here is an example in terms of math and science. Some of the prerequisite, for example, for something in science might be held in mathematics. So the system is able to actually bring in these different knowledge points and actually connect them together to bring in that underlying value and recommendation for the student, and incidentally for the teacher who is managing this classroom. Another kind of application, and this is data taken directly from Alif system last year. It just highlight, like, let's pick the lowest skills from grade 5, 6, and 7, which have been least mastered. And you can immediately see that a lot of these skills have repeating themes. So we're mainly talking about ratio, about fractions, things of that nature. You often find this a recurring thing that's happening, which could be one of 2 reasons. One, it has to do with the fact that there is a compound effect. So grade 5 would carry on these missing skills all the way up, and then you will have that spread in terms of mastery. The other thing is that these are difficult concepts to explain. So finding good ways to actually introduce this concept and actually pushing them forward becomes a critical point when it comes to data and AI application. This is a research paper that was published by the Alif team, and it studies what are some of the key factors that influence learning mathematics in Abu Dhabi. And this is in a peer-reviewed journal, the Gulf Education and Social Policy Review Journal. There are, by the way, like if you were to read the paper, there are much more factors that are being considered here. But some of the top factors, if you just look at them, have to do with language and have to do with literacy. So AI is able to say, like, look, mathematics is something important that we can cater for, but there are other connected factors that we can look at. There are things like in-class anxiety. There are all these things, these nuances that once you actually design your algorithms, you can actually try to see what are these type of connection. And what's interesting here is that the language of instruction has a bigger impact than the age of a student. So age is a feature in the system. So if you give the machine 2 students, one is 15 years old, the other one is 12, the machine will be able to give you a better prediction if you were to use the language in that regard. And one of the top features is self-efficacy in math, which simply means the belief as a student that I'm able to solve some of these mathematical concepts, which takes me back to the point in terms of recommendation and personalization, that the closer you are to your goal as a student and the closer the goal is for you to reach, then you're probably able to better perform and better reach some of the outcomes that are highlighted. In terms of AI application, there is a breadth in terms of them that are in the system. Some of them developed, some of them are under development, but we're focusing a lot in terms of diagnostic. So we have an English diagnostic test, and we're releasing a math diagnostic test. These tests have been benchmarked and have been validated in terms of performance throughout the years. And we're working a lot in terms of recommendation and improving that recommendation while the students are learning.
Sorry, but 2 more minutes.
Yes, I will try as much as possible to jump in maybe to the biggest thing. So here, one thing that I think is extremely important is because we have these different pipelines connected, and I call them pipeline because truly in Aleph, every single interaction of the student, teacher, principal, and guardian will link into a single data source. We can do quite a lot of things when it comes with this information. So there could be things around machine learning that can be built. There can be research analysis, as I've showed you already, and that could be directly reports that are being sent to different stakeholders in the Aleph ecosystem. So all of these are applications that can happen. I've extracted this data yesterday just to make a point, like 5 minutes. Here I'm trying to measure like the engagement of the parent and the performance of the student. So parents that are heavily engaged in the platform, so there is a dedicated guardian app for the parents that they can use, their students tend to do much better, their children tend to do much better than the ones that don't engage. Now, this is a correlation, right? So which obviously says like if you have the right culture at home, then there are all of these implications. This is no surprise, but what's interesting here is that we can take this a bit further. We can understand what kind of engagement with the parents we need and how can we engage the parents further to push things down the line and help with the outcomes.
Joe, sorry, a lot of people are actually interested. They told me give him 5 more minutes. If that's okay.
Yeah, but out of respect, maybe for my next.
We'll give her a few minutes too, because people are actually interested in the presentations. Thank you, and sorry about this. Thank you.
No worries, no worries. So one of the big things that I want us to highlight here is the predictive models that we've built in Aleph, because you have all of these information that are coming into the system. We're able to build what has been highlighted before in terms of predictive model or predictive analysis. So before COVID hit, and I'll just speak a bit more about this point, using Aleph for 2-3 weeks, the algorithms would be able to predict the scores of the student on an exam with an accuracy of 15%. And there are this data has been tested and validated a few times. Here, what we're talking about is if I have historical data about a student doing something very specific, can I use the information in Aleph currently to predict things in the future, and how can I connect it back to the different people in the ecosystem? So that includes the different decision makers that are out there, the principal, the trainer, and the teachers that are using the system. Exam prediction is one big thing, but I just want to give a small caveat here when it comes to machine learning and some of these different elements. If your underlying behavior change, your model requires an update. So what happened during COVID, the behavior of the student using Aleph completely changed because they started using very differently than how they were using it in the classroom. So all these things actually led our model to require a lot of rework in order to get back to the same results that we had before. So here I would say, like, look, AI is something important, something that helped, but the models themselves, especially when it comes to predictive modeling, requires a bit of stability, especially if you're trying to see how the students are performing in the system. In terms of risks and implication, and I will just highlight these a bit quickly, but they're extremely important. There is a saying in data science, which is garbage in, garbage out. So pretty much your models and your application are as good as the data which is fed into that system. It's actually now these days not the main problem isn't necessarily the algorithm. It's more around having this sound information, sound data, and this sound feature design or feature engineering behind the scene. The other problem, which maybe a lot of companies do face, and I've seen it firsthand, is not involving the educator and the domain expertise in the development process. So a lot of these AI models are not pure data science models. They actually require input from the field, from educator to understand what is happening and to understand the data, what it is actually telling us. And the last two part is around protocols and codes in terms of how data is used. There is a lot of data, a lot of assumption. I've already said before 10-15% is a good thing when it comes to data science in terms of error. But is it a good thing if you were reporting that data for parents, for example? Is this something acceptable? How do you deal with that? So a lot of the problem in data science can go directly into the user experience. How do they actually experience AI? How do they experience these recommendations in a way that caters through the learning journey
And these are some of the areas which we are working and focusing on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'm so sorry for the interruption. I was told off by a lot of people, like, just let him speak. I'm so sorry.
No worries, no worries.
The predictive modeling was really eye-opening to me. Now I know, like, it's a new way for me to understand personalization of education, and it makes sense to me now why you are dominating the public schools in the UAE. So I just wanted to say that, like, but now we're going to move to our next speaker, Priya Lakhani. Priya Lakhani is the CEO of Century Tech, which is the most widely used AI platform for education in international schools in the region. So Alif was the dominating in public schools, but we have Century from private schools. To present Priya is the founder and CEO of Century Tech, an artificial intelligence education technology company that develops AI-powered learning tools for schools, colleges, universities, and employers across the world. She's actually a barrister, and she's definitely an entrepreneur. Priya was awarded the Business Entrepreneur of the Year by the Chancellor in 2009 and Officer of the Order of the British Empire in 2014. She was a business advisor to the UK's coalition government and was appointed to the UK's government AI Council in 2019. In 2018, Priya co-founded the Institute for Ethical AI in Education, which helps to enable learners to benefit from AI in education in an ethical way. Without further ado.
Thank you very much for everybody in Dubai, and I hope you all, in the UAE in general, I hope you have a wonderful week, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much, Priya. I'm not only impressed by the amount of information that you packed into these 10 minutes, but really very impressive, the amount and the type of data that you've been collecting. And we are definitely going to be keeping in touch. Thank you very much. Right now, I'm going to hand it to Ustad Mahra, the director of RCEP, to end this seminar. Thank you very much.
شكرا سحر. شكرا لكل المحاضرين. Thank you, our expert, for this knowledge. I think the people are interested, and نشكر معالي حسين الحمادي والدكتور عبد الرحمن العاصمي لتواجدهم معنا. وأترك الآن وكذلك أشكر فريق العمل اللي اشتغل على هذه الندوة والإعداد على هذه الندوة، وتحت قيادة الدكتور عبد السلام الجوفي والأخت سحر والإخوان من مكتب التربية العربي. شكرا لكم على إعداد هذه الندوة التي استفاد منها الكثير. وأترك الآن المجال للدكتور عبد السلام الجوفي لختام الندوة بكلماته المؤثرة. تفضل دكتور عبد السلام.
شكرا أستاذة مهرة، فعلا أتحفتينا اليوم بهذا الجهد المتميز والرائع. أتحفنا أيضا المحاضرين المتميزين.
دكتور عبد السلام. دكتور عبد السلام.
اي نعم معك. فقلت لك اتحفتم هذه المحاضرات الرائعه والقيمه وهذا الجهد العظيم الذي بذل فيه استاذه مهره وبذلها ايضا الخبراء وبذلها المعدين، لا يستحق منا الشكر الجزيل، والشكر موصول لاصحاب معالي المهندس حسين الحمادي ومعالي الدكتور عبد الرحمن على توجيهاتهم وعلى قيادتهم لهذا العمل. وانا متاكد تماما بان هذه هي بداية العمل لاستكشاف المستقبل. المستقبل هو الذكاء الاصطناعي، المستقبل هو الثورة الصناعية الرابعة، وهذه من ممكناتها. وأنا أعتقد أن هذه البداية الرائعة التي قلتيها أستاذة مهرة وقادها المركز التخطيط التربوي في الشارقة وبالتعاون مع مكتب التربية العربية لدول الخليج سوف يكون له ما بعده. أشكر الجميع وأنا والناس، ونظرا ل أن الوقت متأخر وهناك عندنا اليوم أكثر من 1000 مشارك. بصراحة أجهدناهم بهذا الكم الهائل، وكان المؤتمر هذا كان يفترض أن يكون مؤتمرا وليس فقط ندوة. لذلك أنا أتوقع تماما أن يلحقه العديد من الأعمال، وأتمنى رسالة ورقة العمل للجميع. شكرا لك أستاذ مهرة والأخ عبد الله وللجميع هذا الجهد الرائع والمميز. شكرا جزيلا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا لكم ونلقاكم بإذن الله في ندوات أخرى للمركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي ومكتب التربية العربي والجهود المشتركة لأجل أنظمة التعليم في وطننا العربي.